Welcome to the Tavernside Chats with Will.
3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tavernside Chat. I'm your Tavernkeeper Will, and we have a extremely amazing guest today. But before we do that, I do want to let you guys know, check out our merch store in the description, and hey, pop on by our Tavern in the Middle of Nowhere, our Discord server as well. Otherwise, we have a phenomenal guest today. He is a film critic, having published over 400 reviews, essays, and interviews on The Observer, Polygon, Looper, and Fanbyte. He's a member of the band No Jersey and produces music on Spotify as well. And he is one of the co-hosts of Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, a podcast that has taken the failed cinematic universe of the Dark Universe with the Tom Cruise mummy and turned it into a real, I think, over 30 long movie franchise that is so well written. Dylan Roth, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the very warm welcome. It makes me sound very accomplished. It's weird to, at some point, you reach a point in your life like, wait, do I have a body of work?
I think you do. Like, there's a little thing you can be like, look back, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I do have like a big thing that I could point to and be like, oh, I did it actually. But I know I'm kind of stealing this from your podcast, Are You Afraid of Dylan and Dalton? Bev check, what are you drinking?
Oh, just I ran to get a classic can of Coke. This one has Darth Sidious on it. Although this looks like a cap from Jedi, so we will call him Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah, it does look like it does look like it.
Here he is on the bottom of the steps in the throne room in Jedi.
Nice,
how about you?
Nice. I have a Starbucks medicine ball tea because I recently got back from a convention and I am now getting sick with both con crud and what the other teachers at the school are calling the which is just some kind of weird head cold that's been passed around between every single teacher. So this is keeping me from dying here.
As the parent of a toddler, I can relate a little. I don't have it nearly as bad because it's not year after year of new petri dishes entering my life. But
you know what? You build up an immunity. I've been told by year 3 you're good. Unfortunately, I'm on year 2 now, so I'm still kind of like getting that level of sickness in me. Well, yeah, so today, we're going to be talking a little bit. We're going a little bit outside of our TTRPG space here because, you know, every sort of TTRPG has some kind of writing. And we're going to be talking about the writing process and also a little bit about horror writing today. Because your podcast, Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, you've made your own cinematic universe of horror movies. So, getting started with that, what has been your experience with tabletop role-playing games or writing in the past? I don't know if you've ever done stuff like D&D before.
I have a little bit of tabletop experience. In my family, my wife is the big D&D player. She's had a party that she's been playing continuously with some set of characters for, I think, 13, 15 years now.
Whoa.
They have the kind of campaign where like there's a spreadsheet for like the taxes of their small business. Like it is extremely involved. They have a payroll, you know, like they've reached the point in their questing that they are now like there's a bunch of non-player characters who they dispatch to do a lot of their questing for them.
So they're like high level.
Yeah, that's just what happens. Is you let any system run for long enough, it's going to do something insane like that. My own experience is a little bit more limited. I think that I have the weird position and inadvisable, mind you, that I think I've been. I think I've run more games than I've played.
Okay.
Because I never had a D&D group steadily in high school or college or in my 20s until I accepted a sort of offhand challenge from a friend to come up with a Mass Effect style RPG setting.
Ooh, interesting.
And so I used, initially we were just using the basic Lasers and Feelings game set where, it's just like one die. You have, are you familiar with this?
I've not heard of Lasers and Feelings, actually. No.
It is a one-page rule system.
Okay.
Where essentially you take, I think you run it with a 12, with a d12, and a lower number is for lasers, which is stuff like really anything sort of scientific or active, like the sort of like your laser stat is for your dexterity or for your use of scientific equipment. And your feeling stat is charisma, intuition, stuff like that. And so everything you do is just one dice roll, and then you run that number against your character stats for lasers or feelings. Because the idea is to keep it as mathematically simple and I guess not as game-like, and to really focus on just building your narrative in your world, which as somebody who didn't have a lot of experience, it meant I didn't have to set up nearly as many parameters. I could just focus on writing a really big, but sort of like source book for the universe that we were making. And I had a lot of fun with that. But the game didn't last very long. We only did it for a couple of months. Just because
scheduling problems.
Scheduling problems, I know. Yep. And so I do kind of miss it. I'm very pretty proud of the world we created. The game, the setting was called the Orion Spur, and it was an environment where I got to create a bunch of wholesale alien species and try to build their cultures out, figure out their traditions and everything in order to create conditions for someone to create their characters within them, which I found a lot of joy in doing that. And knowing that I had a target where like we kind of wanted to feel like Mass Effect, and I love Mass Effect. That would be my favorite video game RPG of all time.
Yeah.
And
good taste, by the way. Good taste, by the way. Thank
you. I hope they never make the new one. I hope they just leave it alone. No, I don't really mean that. It could be fine. I don't expect it. I don't expect anything out of it. You know, I had my fun. But so I played that for a little bit, and apart from that, I've really only played one shots here and there.
Okay.
With people who have made it really easy for me to settle down and play. I love the process. I like playing the game, but it is the kind of thing where, especially, I am not a fantasy person. I'm a space boy, right? So the main draw of D&D for a lot of people is they want to play in a fantasy world. I'm interested in playing in more of a science fiction world. So from the beginning, my pool of players is smaller. And then there's the scheduling thing, and now I'm a parent with a podcast and a YouTube show and a band, and I just don't see it ever happening.
Yep. Fair enough. I think that is the thing that the true villain of any tabletop role-playing game is scheduling conflicts. I do think it's very fascinating, though, how a lot of your writing experience comes from, or at least your tabletop experience comes from a more scientific sci-fi background. Have you ever tried systems like SW5E or Starfinder?
I have not played them personally. I think here's a difficulty that I have, I suppose, is that I hate to read.
Okay, yes.
Which is a
famously has not ever read a book.
I've never read a book. I've never read a book, although I'll have a couple Adrian Tchaikovsky titles to recommend. Let's see. But so I like the creation aspect of it. I'm the kind of person who could spend all day in a character creator and then stop playing. Even like in like a video game or something like that. I like the free writing aspect. So really, at the end of the day, what I really want to do is write the story. And as I do, when you talk about asking about also writing background, I did go to school to write. I have a BA in creative writing from Susquehanna University, for whatever that's worth. From personal experience, I can tell you not very much, but it was funny that when we started doing the podcast, suddenly all of these sort of skills and lessons that I learned from like the formal process of workshopping short stories and crafting story in an environment like a sort of pedagogy / workshop environment became suddenly very useful again.
Yeah. When it comes to the writing process, like, where do you usually start first? Like, what is the kind of core, that avocado pit that you build everything else around?
Well, the format of our show gives me the great gift of having to having to produce something. And not being able to think, well, maybe one day I should write something like this or that if I have an idea. It's like, no, you better write the shit down now. I didn't ask about swearing. Is it cool if I swear?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because you're going to have to deliver a script in 6 weeks. So you better start working on that right now, and then you better write down anything that doesn't fit and put it down into another file, because in 12 weeks, you're going to have another script to deliver. So... but where I like to start with, Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe gave me the great gift of, on our show for the past 3 years, we used existing horror movies as starting points and had to create interconnected remakes of things like Frankenstein or Creature from the Black Lagoon, or more obscure titles like Cat People or The Old Dark House. And that made it easy where I could start with what is it that I like about this thing, and jump off from there. Early on in the first episodes, we were kind of just finding our sort of our footing. My scripts or treatments for the Wolfman and Jekyll X Hyde started with essentially the same inciting incident. The first 20 minutes of the Wolfman transplanted into a college setting, or the first 10 pages of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde became the inciting incident of my Jekyll and Hyde movie. And then from there, it's just throw everything out that I don't like and just keep going. It's a little bit trickier now, because this is breaking news for you also, because this is going to air right after we announce the next saga. The next thing we're doing is I am now the host of the Pod Universe with Dylan and Dalton, where we are doing all original science fiction and horror stories. In the Internet universe. So I no longer have that crutch of saying I have to do a Frankenstein. I have to try and start from, I kind of like to do something in the vein of then X or Y. And from that point on, your guidance is a little bit different, where instead of being like, well, I have to do this beat and this beat and this beat is what people expect, you almost do the opposite. You're being like, okay, well, I kind of want to write something that feels like Battlestar Galactica, but I can't just write Battlestar Galactica. So what would I do if I couldn't write Battlestar Galactica? And you go on from there.
Interesting.
So I'm finally writing that space opera. It's not the Orion Spur, but it is letting me have similar kind of fun, where I am building some cultures to play with and pitting them against each other in ways that I hope are going to be exciting to listen to, and not just exciting for me to play with.
That's so cool. First of all, that's my live reaction. You guys get finding out what the next chapter of this amazing podcast is going to be. So excited for that. That's going to be so cool.
I'm really glad to hear
It's going to be great. It's going to be great that you're getting to use some of your sci-fi chops in there as well, since that's like, one of the core genres you love to write in there. That's going to be so cool to see in any horror movie, because again, it's a lot of the stuff you base was on horror. People die. There's an entire YouTube channel based on that. I've counted kills in horror movies. So like when it comes to, you've said this a couple times listening to the podcast of like writing it, I had to kill off this character. What is it in your brain that when you're writing something makes you be like, okay, cool, this character has to die now?
Well, I think there's a point when you're writing stories, you're always trying to manage your stakes, right? You want to build them up at the right points, and you want to resolve them at the right points, and you want it to matter to the characters in a way that relates to how matters to your listeners or your audience, however it is you're telling your story. A lot of times I let the consequences of characters' actions sort of guide them to a place. I've only a couple times had to write a story where I knew from the get-go, this is the story in which I kill this character. But going back into, the first thing that I wrote for the show was the Wolfman, and we'd introduced these three werewolf characters, and I kind of imagined them sort of as Luke, Leia, and Han in terms of the roles that they play in the story, and I thought the three of them were going to be around for a long time. And there's a point where I just had one of them cornered, and I'm just thinking of the geometry of the scene. I'm thinking about where the stakes have gone. I'm like, anything that I do to get him out of this is gonna undercut the stakes I've set up. And the real way to pay off those stakes is to have this guy just die right here. And because I wasn't committed to long-term plans, I decided to prioritize the stakes in the moment. There are times where I have had long-term plans, and then I've sacrificed those. There's in our Hunchback of Notre Dame episode, there is a debate that Dalton and I have where we end up changing the ending of the story there on the spot during the performance and workshop, where I kill off Esmeralda because I think the story stakes demand it, and Dalton talked me down from that. This is the kind of things I think that happen also because we write so quickly. That I don't have the opportunity usually to double back and reconsider or think like, well, here's how I would do it differently on a second pass. That early in the show, there was no second pass. Thankfully now we have more time, but I think it's time for a character to go when their story is done, when their story is incomplete, but ending it here would be really tragic. That was the Esmeralda thing, where it felt like she had so much left to do. And I think that sometimes death in stories should be satisfying, and sometimes they should feel like death. They should shock you, and you should feel like it's unfair, because death frequently is. And sometimes it's because I want it to mean something. My stories tend to have a strong political bent, and that does mean I sometimes moralize from my comfortable spot at my keyboard and can just let bad things happen to people who I think deserve it. But sometimes you're leaving the flags there and you don't realize you're doing it and you have to pay it off. Sometimes I just say fuck it. It's just the nature of death is that sometimes it's satisfying, sometimes it's not satisfying, and you got to find out what serves your story best.
Well, I think that's also very fascinating from like a TTRPG standpoint of like, because we are playing games fundamentally. Like, part of the rule set is that people can die. Like, if you get into a very serious combat encounter, like sometimes, like, oh, this random goblin rolled 3 nat 20s and now I'm dead. Like, I think it's very fascinating to look at that because a lot of people see like death in those situations in TTRPGs. It's like, oh, it was unearned, but that's what I loved about you when Esmeralda died. I'm like, oh, that hurt. I'm like, yeah, because sometimes death does feel unearned, and sometimes it just comes out of the blue and like is unsatisfying.
I mean, I sympathize with that as it happens in the case of a story, and people, first of all, are very attached to their characters. I was telling you before we started recording. No, I think I was telling you here on the show that my wife's been playing this campaign for 15 years. They've lost a few characters, right? And it's been a big deal. Tears were shed, it was intense. And the thing is that when this kind of stuff happens in real life, and you feel like it's unfair, you can go through that cycle of grief and you can shake your fist at God and you can scream why it's not fair. In an RPG, God's sitting right there. And you can get mad at that person and you can insist that it be done differently, or you can say that's not how that should work, even though you were all there, right? There are times, I'm sure, when I know that a DM can be unfair, and sometimes it's just being cruel and it's decided today I'm killing off somebody. That's, as I understand it, pretty bad form. Right?
That is bad form.
Railroaded your players in that way.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do that. There's the idea of like we're all telling this table at the story at this table together, and so if you're doing that in like a very tyrant way, that's how you that's the red flag of a DM of like they're like, oh, they just want to kill somebody. Like if you're trying to go all Game of Thrones on someone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where there's a similarity between when you're writing a narrative of your own for an audience and when you're playing one, is that if you ever feel like you, the storyteller, are simply on a power trip, you're doing it wrong. That's bad. Don't do that. I'm pretty vocal on the show about how I don't think it's usually satisfying to an audience to simply do a thing you think the audience would like. It's also not good to do something just because you want to fuck with them. When it's a matter of like, oh, I am telling the story, and in this story I set all the rules and conditions, and I control all the characters. But in this case, the people who I'm beholden to are my audience, and I'm lucky enough to have one, right? You want to respect the investment that people have made in your time. In an RPG setting, you've literally been there the whole time together. right? You're going to stare your audience in the face, and they're not just your audience, they're your co-writers, they're your collaborators, they're your team. I can't imagine looking them in the eye if I've done something unfair. But I think that you have to also imagine that you got to build trust between your team, right? So
absolutely.
If you're running a game and a character's dying, you have to have that relationship with your players, that they trust that this is how it happened. This is not how you made it happen. This is how it happened.
Yeah. I think that there's a very like beautiful thing behind that too, of like, I think trust at the end of the day, that is a conversation that like 99 times in this podcast, where like it all comes back to knowing your audience, of like who you're writing for. Are they going to get too offended by this choice I make? Or like, if it like setting up consequences for actions of like, you don't want to be just like, oh yeah, this happens because you're God and I demand it. It's like, no, you did this happened. And again, like you said earlier, setting up all those flags of like, cool, you set up all these flags. It is the most logical case in this scenario. And even if the player doesn't want their character to die, you can just be like, okay, cool, something bad is going to happen to you that is like death, but not death. Like, you can give them like a permanent injury, or like they can get brought back but wrong in some way.
Yeah, you want to create some sense of consequences, because otherwise, if your audience or your players don't feel as if bad things can happen, because they never do, then they're gonna get bored. I mean, that's my feeling anyway. People do look to entertainment or games for different things, right? Some people just want it to be cozy. And as long as everybody involved is on the same page about that, then that's fine. We tell horror stories on my show, what ultimately turns out to be war stories, you know? So sometimes we have to kill one or all of your favorite characters. Otherwise, it won't feel like anything. And I'm pleased that we were able to pull something like that off in a way that ended up giving what I hoped and have heard so far. I'm sure that the audience is not a monolith. I'm sure that I'm only mostly hearing from the people who really liked it, and the people who were mad about it aren't going to say anything to me. That we pulled it off pretty good. We made those hard choices worthwhile. Yeah,
there's always fascinating moments of like, in a long-term campaign that I ran, there was the big turning point of arc 1, as I call, of like the first arc of the game, which like I broke it up into 2 big like stories or books, as I called them, where it took place at the magic school. They had gotten to know and love the professor, and then I did the thing where at the end of the first big act, they're like, you know, the headmaster of the academy, the person they loved, sacrificed his life so that they could all get away and run. And so it was like a moment where, yes, it was a tragic death. They were all like, go. But also it was kind of earned, because also in the story where I knew it was going, he kind of answered too many problems that they would have had. Of like, he's kind of way too powerful to solve this problem of like, why is it that these tiny adventurers are solving the big problems? Oh, because the person who would usually take care of it is gone now.
Right. That's why Gandalf has to go in Fellowship. Yes. Right? You can get him back later when the party's divided and the goals are different. But he can't go to Mount Doom. He answers too many questions, he solves too many problems, and also his death is what begins to shatter the Fellowship, right? It doesn't happen overnight. You need that. Luke doesn't become Luke unless Obi-Wan dies.
I mean, Luke doesn't go on the adventure until Uncle and Aunt Beru are dead. Like,
oh, geez, gosh, what a disrespect to Beru and Lars on my part.
Oh yeah, them too. Both of them are big moments in the character. Like, I was also just teaching the plot diagram to my students the other day. I teach English, and so I was using Star Wars examples the whole time, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just thinking about, I've had so much Star Wars on the brain lately.
I mean, it's harder to find a easier to plot and more universally understood, like, sort of Campbellian hero's arc than Star Wars. Do kids now still know the original Star Wars? Do they care about the original Star Wars?
Do. Thank God
Okay.
they do. Fortunately, I was able to use Wizard of Oz and Star Wars as my example because Wizard of Oz is still in the public consciousness because of Wicked and because it's like, you know, I think what most people go to when they say like one of the best movies of all time, at least, or like
Sure.
classic, like a classic
Think
of
about-
cinema.
It was ancient when we were kids, and it still holds up for us. So it's nice that it sticks around.
Jake has put in the chat, we don't know for sure if Owen and Aunt Beru are dead. They could have just been dead stormtroopers. Luke never looked. Worst nephew. I will say it was a
What's to look
smoking
at there?
and burnt
Smoking burnt bodies. Then if Owen and Beru aren't dead, they're the assholes at this point.
Yeah.
Because they just bailed and we never heard from them again.
Another one of the questions I had here, you mentioned in the past the idea of it's horror, not lore, when it comes to the Mummy and that movie's failings. How do you run the line of giving exposition to your audience or to your players without making them feel like it's just a giant lore dump in any story?
Well, in horror in particular, Dalton's the one who said horror, not lore. I think this is something that they said in our very first episode as some piece of note that they took while we were watching The Mummy 2017 for the first time, right before we recorded the first episode. I think that horror, specifically, it's important not to understand everything.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get... The more you know in a horror situation, usually the less scary it's going to be. The exception, I suppose, is when you're aiming for dread. Dread is the opposite. Dread, the more you know, the worse you feel. But when it's something like dealing with how magic works, or fully understanding like the mindset of your monster, when you're able to relate that much to whatever it is that's supposed to frighten you, that can be psychologically scary, but on like the visceral level you're going for in most monster movies, I don't think it's helpful. I think it's better not to know. I think it's better to know just enough that you can wonder and try to put it together yourself. On a larger sense of telling a story, when you have exposition, you have background you need to give in order for the story to make sense. I think it's helpful to give your audience like 40 to 60% of it before you explain how it works. So that they can put enough of it together on their own that they don't feel like they're being lectured, they're being validated. Audiences, everyone likes to be told, you were right. Everyone likes that. You can't do it all the time, right? But when it comes to trying to make something not be a chore, when you want the heavy stuff, like explaining the mechanics of hell, it's easier to slow roll that stuff, give that information just as it becomes relevant to your characters, and then by the time you really need to clarify it and spell it all out, you're just filling in gaps, and the audience is like, I knew that, I knew it, I was right, and occasionally like, oh, I was a little off there. Otherwise, they're going to tune out, I think. I mean, everyone's different. Some people love lore. There are people who would rather read a Wikipedia page of a movie than watch a movie, and that's to each their own.
I think you brought up something really fascinating there with this is going to come out September 8th. I can talk about Weapons. That movie will have been out for a month now.
Weapons.
It is. Oh God,
It's so good.
It is. That was going to be one of the questions I asked you either before, like, hey, what did you think of Weapons? Because on the most recent bonus pod, you mentioned that you were going to see it.
Have to go. We went. We had a fantastic time. That was a great movie experience because it's very rare that I'm so invested. The word immersed. So immersed in a movie that the critical parts of my brain just never bother to spin up.
Yes.
And I was just awash in how funny and thrilling and pretty it is. Just like it's an ugly, just like a great sensory experience. That I wasn't even thinking about doing my usual, like, yeah, but what does it mean? And then I had a conversation with Dalton after, and Dalton's machinery was working. And so it's like I got to appreciate it twice, once on a completely animalistic level, and then once on a more intellectual level.
That's absolutely phenomenal. I love any movie that can give you that experience. I argue it's the best horror movie experience I've had in a theater since Nope came out.
Man.
Nope is, and that's saying something because Nope is like one of my favorite movies of all time. Not just horror, one of my favorite movies, period.
It's great, and I have to say, every time I'm on mic now and it comes up, I posted at the time a kind of tepid review of Nope, and if I could take one back, that's the one. I'm taking that one right back. When you sit down to review a movie, sometimes you're just not vibing, and it's your fault. Sometimes you write a review, and then you see it again later, you're like, wait, no, I'm wrong. That happened to me with Nope, and it happened with Dune Part 2. I was wrong both times. Those movies are great.
I think Nope is one of those movies that really benefits from like that critical analysis. I always say Jordan Peele is a phenomenal horror director who makes very intelligent movies that wants you to know what they're about. Like that, I think that is one of the most, like, one of the best parts of his directing style, along with everything else about his directing style. But like, we started this conversation about Nope, and started about weapons and then horror, but I think that those movies are phenomenal. Weapons and Nope to an extent as well do great things of like giving you those little teases almost. Like in Weapons, you see the shot of the empty door and like the person coming out of it with the scissors or to like clip her hair, and then they leave you on that of like, okay, cool, what was that for? Like, it's a visceral scene, but then it does the J.J. Abrams thing of like leaving you with like the mystery box with another box inside. So you got an answer, but it still doesn't make sense, and like kind of sends you thinking.
Yeah, that's a structure of movie that I always love, and there was a draft of my Night of the Living Dead script that we did for the pod that was trying to do this kind of thing, where you would be jumping through time based on whose story it was, and it didn't work because it's really hard. And Zach Cregger pulled it off extremely well. I just love the way that story unfolds, and in each one of those little chapters, you get such a specific flavor, and it's like a short story collection, and the complete work it's masterful. What a great film!
Great movie.
I have been telling I don't like to even say anything too specific about it, because anybody who sees it, it's such a gift if you get to see it without knowing anything.
Yeah.
I was thrilled that I originally was supposed to see it at Alamo Drafthouse, and my plans didn't work out, and I went to an AMC later another time, and I was really glad that I did, because I was thinking, oh, I'm so glad the check hasn't shown up, because they always bring you the check 40 minutes before credits at Alamo Drafthouse, and I have no idea how far we are through this movie. It is so great not to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a treat.
I had the fortune of seeing that movie with my younger sister right before she went off to college. So that was like our last, a couple weeks ago at this point. That was like our last thing of like, this is our last thing you're doing. She's also not a big horror fan too. Love you, Paige. And so for her to walk out of a horror movie and be like, that is one of the best movies I've ever seen. I'm like, yes, this is why we love the genre.
Yeah, this is one of those ones that, like, do not have to be a horror fan at all. And most of all, you can always pitch it with, like, it's so funny. It's so funny.
It is.
I can't call it the funniest movie of the year yet because I haven't seen Naked Gun, but it's...
Oh, I've heard...
Wow,
I have heard great things. I still have not seen it yet, but I wasn't sold, and then I saw some of the jokes they did in the trailers, and like, okay, yeah, with the Spirit Halloween over the police station, like, that is a great bit to do. But I do think, just that mystery box approach of just like not hiding certain things, giving them like 40 to 60%, and then they can feel your players or your audience can be like, I was right at the end there. You also mentioned something about your Night of the Living Dead pitch, which has a whole bunch of like deliberate social themes in it of like about politics and stuff like that. Horror at its best is always commentating on societal issues of some kind. How do you draw the line of trying to represent a certain issue while still not being too insensitive to people who are possibly suffering? Like Weapons theme is about school shootings somewhat, and so how do you kind of like represent issues posed in your horror movies without being insensitive?
God, I hope I can do it. It's hard because you don't want to be too self-conscious, because then you'll forget to tell a story, and you'll just spend a lot of your story with doing various caveats and trying to create the conditions that your story can't be misinterpreted or hurt somebody's feelings whose feelings you don't want hurt. I have a really big advantage on my show, which is that I'm there to defend my work as my audience hears it, which is an unbelievably useful and unfair advantage for a storyteller to have. And I imagine that that's not all that different from if you are DMing a campaign and somebody in your player says bullshit. You could be like, you got to give me 5 minutes here, okay? Just gotta just open the door. I promise when you go through the door, something cool is going to be there, right? Most storytellers can't do that. When you are writing a novel or you're putting out a movie, the audience always has the ability to be like, I'm done, I'm out of here, and you can't be like, just go on, 1 second. You have to give the audience some kind of carrot on the other side to be like, the story has to be able to say, hear me out for you. And I get to do that myself. And the fact that I am like, Dalton and I are characters on the show in the sense that we are part of why you're here, right? You like, we were saying, like, I on our show that as we go into doing our new thing, you might have started listening because you're interested in hearing something about the Mummy or Frankenstein, but if you're still here, you probably like us. And we've gotten to build up some trust with you to try something new. I have that shield, right? So I think I'd be a lot more afraid to delve into political themes if I then just had to sit back for like 6 months to 2 years and wait to see how it was received. I mean, I have anxiety. I would have a really hard time with that.
Completely fair enough.
I also have a very small audience, I don't have to. Most of the people who listen to my show or now watch my show so far, I mean, hopefully we're going to be growing sooner rather than later, because as a natural consequence of capitalism, I have to make the show bigger. I don't aspire to a larger audience. I just have to have one. In order to keep doing it.
That's the natural progression of everything, unfortunately, due to this nightmare system we live in.
Yeah. The bigger an audience you have, the greater chance it is that what you say or do is going to be misconstrued and offend them, or be interpreted correctly and hurt their feelings, right? Our audience is pretty self-selecting. It's pretty far left, pretty queer. So when we do stuff that's leftist or queer, that's rarely going to be a problem for people unless we do it wrong. Unless we do a bad job, right? It's hard though, because if you tell a story where my whole goal is I want to tell a story about this idea, if you let that overtake the things that make a story, which are characters and consequences and fucking kills and gags, and then
crushing
it's not gonna
Esmeralda's head by little brother.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult that, like, people. A thing that people who claim to be apolitical, which of course isn't a real thing, but say about stories like, I don't want you preaching your politics to me. It's like, well, no, you don't. No one wants to be preached to, right? That's not a thing anyone really enjoys. You want to explore an idea, and I think the most satisfying stuff in stories sometimes comes from being challenged without feeling like it's a challenge. When it feels like a conversation you're having with someone that you have a rapport with. I like to write about climate dread, even though I usually couch it in like supernatural things.
Mhm.
I like to write about the culture war in as compassionate a way as I can, without being too much of an apologist for people who I think are killing the earth. And it's hard, I think probably I'm going to step in it real bad one day, and hopefully it'll be in a scenario where I'm either able to make a graceful apology that is accepted, or the people who are mad at me are people whose opinions I don't care about that much, and I can just kind of get by. Sample size is everything. You're talking about your DM. You've got 4 people who are your friends and who you hang out with theoretically every week, but probably more like every 3 weeks. And it's hard. All I can do is hope that Dalton likes it, because that will paint the perception of my audience very much when the person who I'm saying to in the room says, "Hey, Dylan, I think you did a really good job with that." I'm like, "Oh, good. Okay, good." Because they're now 25% of the audience also thinks that, because they hadn't made up their mind yet. And you just stole it from me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for setting the vibe at "we like this."
I do think
completely unfair.
I do think you land on a really good point there of specifically looking at building stuff for your audience in mind. Of you're able to tailor stuff a little bit to the audience that you have, and DMs are being like, "Okay, cool." There's been times in which I've been playing games and I've explicitly made romanceable NPCs for my friends, knowing on exactly what they like and what their types are. It has worked 95% of the time. I say 95 because one time I built one for my now fiance, and then she was just like, "No, I like the creepy little goblin man in the corner better." I'm like, "Okay, cool."
Doesn't it always make you feel great when someone you're involved with is like, "I like that little weirdo over there. That's my type." It's like, "Oh, great." I'm not reading into it. I feel great about myself right now.
Their name was Carlisle, and they were this tiny little feral alligator-esque half witch guy, and they were introduced by eating mushrooms and moss in the corner, and she was just like, "No, him, he's the one I want." I'm like, "Sweet, okay, cool." And then our other friend poached the one who was inspired by Joker from Persona 5, and I'm like, "Okay, I thought you would go from Joker Persona 5. No, you went for tiny little garbage man." But you know what? It all worked out well in the end.
I mean, it's fun to think about, when you know your audience, and the larger your audience, it's sort of it's one of the problems with blockbuster filmmaking that we, as a podcast with a much smaller audience and much less at stake, we have a lot of advantages in terms of making stuff our audience likes, because we are closer to our audience and it's smaller. It helps a lot, right? You get to just make the things that you like, and when you don't need 20 million people to like the same thing that you like, then you can be more specific about the thing you like, and your audience in our current environment, they'll find you, right? Your audience found you, my audience found me, right? But it reminds me of, you've got a wedding coming up. My wife and I, when we started planning our wedding, we had so many bits planned. We had so many ideas for bits. For a while, we thought we were going to do our first dance to the Wii Shop theme.
No, that's kind of iconic,
and we were going to coordinate a thing for it, and we were like, "Who's going to get it?" There's going to be 120 people there. What percentage of the audience is just going to be baffled?
Yeah.
Is that going to be funny enough to us to outweigh how unfunny it is to everyone else? And we decided, okay, we won't do that. We wanted to do the Electro Lemon version of September in our dance thing, where it's just, "Do you remember the 21st night in September? 21st night of September, September the 21st." And we were like, "Oh God, that would be really funny." But that's such a standard at a wedding. Everyone usually sings along with that. What percentage of our guests are going to be like, "Oh, it's this bit, I love this"? And how much is going to be like, "Am I having a stroke right now? What's happening?"
I was literally going to be how many people are going to be like, "I'm having a stroke," or "I need to go sit down because I'm drank too much."
And so almost all of the bits ended up getting scrapped, just because you start out thinking, okay, this is an audience of 2. and then you step back and you think, no, it's actually, my parents are there. Oh yeah, and my aunt and uncle, and like a bunch of people who I have only seen 4 times in my life, and I kind of want them to have a good time. This is, when you're telling a story in that same way, sometimes you start with things that are funny or interesting or scary to you. And if you can't figure out a way to make that thing matter to your audience, and depending on the scale of your story, to as wide an audience as you aspire to have, sometimes you gotta let it go. Sometimes you have to be like, well, that would be cute if I were just telling this story to my wife, or just to Dalton, or just to the 4 people at my table who I see every month for the game. But when you get into a little bit a broader thing, like if we had, like a major love interest character in one of our movies who's like a manic depressive raccoon girl, right? Because like one member of our Discord is always talking about like, I've always wanted a character who's a manic depressive raccoon girl. If that's somebody at your D&D table, you satisfied 20% of your audience. If it's somebody, and you're trying to tell a story for a couple thousand people, it's going to be a really, really small percentage. So your choices now are either get rid of it or really commit to making everybody enjoy this manic depressive raccoon girl.
How do you, because I know you're someone who has absolutely said like how much you hate fan service in any media sometimes. That's explicitly why you said you hated Deadpool and Wolverine in your Letterboxd reviews, that it was kind of just a fan service fest. How do you kind of run the line of like giving your audience what they want without, making it be like, completely detrimental to the world? Like in your Mystery Men pitch, one of the scientists gets blasted with the psychofraculator and turns into your fan favorite character, Rat Hands, which is a guy with rats for hands.
Well, in that case, like, for one thing, Mystery Men was the one where I'm like, I'm just going to do whatever's fun for this one. You guys get one. You guys get one story where I don't second guess anything, that is just the fans would like it. But also, because the appearance of Rat Hands in that story doesn't actually change anything. That could have been any random monster. It's like the kind of thing where like there's when the story has to bend over backwards in order to accommodate some want that the fan has, it's kind of unrelated to what the story is. Like who's playing Gambit, for example. Then like that's not even a terrible example, because it's not as if the joke of Gambit's character doesn't work if you don't know about the fact that Channing Tatum was supposed to play Gambit. That actually does work. The Wesley Snipes thing doesn't really work unless you know about it. The Henry Cavill as Wolverine thing doesn't really work unless you were reading rumors about casting. These are all things that have nothing to do with the movie that you're watching. Then it's like, I have no use for this. This is just like, some percentage of my audience will get this joke because and it's just there for them to get the joke, and it doesn't serve the story really in any way. Those are the ones I have really no use for. But yeah, something small like, I'll go back and I'll take the back about the Channing Tatum Gambit thing. That character is funny on his own because Channing Tatum is funny and he's doing a funny voice, right? The fact that it's Channing Tatum is not the joke. It's a joke on top of the joke. But the main joke is this character fucking talks funny and he looks goofy and he's entertaining to be around. That works. Bits and I'm going to use that movie because I'll pick some example things that I think do work. Wesley Snipes being like, there's only one blade and there only turns to camera and there only ever will be. That diverts the audience's attention for like maybe 2 seconds to get a good joke and then moves on. There's not a whole subplot about how they're trying to find a new blade, but they can't find a new blade. That would be like, well, that's just a joke about how they're having a hard time making a new Blade movie, and that's irrelevant to this film. It really depends on like how much is it distract, how much is it like, is the story that I'm telling suddenly in the service of I want this segment of my audience to be happy. Or is it about I have created an expectation in my audience to want something, and I have laid groundwork to create this want, right? Storytelling is a manipulative process. Like it is something that where your audience has agreed. I want you to mess with me a little bit. I want you to play with my feelings. I want you to do all these things, and I want you to not make it feel like that's what you're doing, right? You want it to feel natural. You want it to feel like you are on the ride. You don't want to feel like you're being pushed around. You want to feel like you're being taken on a ride. When it feels like I'd have to be yanking somebody off the ride in order to take them to some other thing that they would like, that's no good. I can't do it.
I honestly completely understand what you say there, of like everything being in service of the narrative of the story you're trying to tell. In our universe, we have a bit of like people called world walkers, who are just NPCs who have appeared in multiple different campaigns or stories that we did. One of them is named Olivia Rodrockgnome, as a play on Olivia Rodrigo. She just looks like Olivia Rodrigo, but as a gnome. And so, like, there's been multiple times where in stuff we've been doing, she shows up, but I feel like every time we've done it, it's like okay, cool, it's that she's here too, but that character in the story would have worked if it wasn't her either way. And so just making sure that everything that you're building fits, and it doesn't feel like, and like, as you said, you're being taken off the ride there. We're kind of approaching the end here, so I have a couple last questions here. If you were playing in a D&D campaign based off of your Dark Universe, which character from the Dark Legion would you want to play, and why?
That's tough. My two favorites, I mean, Gwen Conliffe, the Wolf Woman, has always kind of been I've been very obvious about playing favorites for that character. She's a character who I put a lot of myself into and who I enjoy writing and voicing. But her power set is not as exciting as one of my other favorite characters to play, was Jenny Halsey.
Yes.
I feel like I would have fun playing Jenny because, for one, I get to do the accent, and I would do that accent. Yeah. And also a character who is always teetering on the edge of falling into dark magics and trying to figure out how she's going to manage the sacrifice required to be effective versus what's going to cost her her life and her soul. And that feels like a good way to make to give her character progression a sense of stakes that would be fun to play with, where like every time you get more powerful, you're also getting more dangerous to yourself and your party. That feels like a fun challenge, in addition to just getting to play, this really complicated woman who wants good things for people and frequently makes poor decisions.
Yeah, no, I can honestly really see that. I forget where it was introduced. I think it was in Love Never Dies, of the idea that every time she uses magic, it kind of sucks away a little bit of time off of her lifespan. That is such a fun way of doing, like, setting up the price of magic almost in a horror media of some kind. Like, it is fun in fantasy while still also playing with the expectations of the genre of like, oh, if you use magic too much, there's an actual like physical cost it's going to do to you.
I think Dalton introduced that wrinkle. I can't remember if I had seeded it in some other thing, but I think it was one of theirs. And I really liked the irony of it, specifically that what Jenny was really fighting for that whole time was more time with her wife, right? She wanted to keep both of them alive. And in her quest to try and protect her wife from death, she was gradually cutting into the amount of time she'd be around to be with her, which is so self-defeating and not at all what Carol would want, and really speaks to the sense of panic that she was going through at the prospect of her wife having to experience hell. Really, Love Never Dies is just like an all-timer to me. It is Dalton a great absolutely crushed it. Anyone who's listening, my writing partner and co-host wrote a rock opera, a fully produced rock opera, as an episode of our show, and it is so good. It's maybe not the best first episode to listen to, but the soundtrack, if nothing else, absolutely whips, and so you'd probably be able to enjoy it even if it was your first episode.
Yeah, I would be lying if I said that I didn't go back and listen to Carol's I Want song and The Raven so many times. Like, those are two absolutely killer songs. Two completely different, like, two different routes, but, like, still, like, it is so good. It's, if anyone was going to listen to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe right after this, what episode would you recommend they start on?
Well, the first episode for The Mummy makes a pretty good on-ramp in terms of us explaining what the show is and what we're trying to do. But the highlight, an episode where it's early enough that the premise is still sort of hardening, but also just absolutely whips, is Dalton's Invisible Man pitch. It's the fourth episode of the show.
Yes.
It's a really good on-ramp because it's just so funny. I always talk about that as being the episode that kind of sells the show, where we really found our footing. It was nice to find it so early. I would go there. But also, by the time this comes out, there will be a YouTube video about 40 minutes long where we kind of just talk about we kind of pitch the whole show, about the whole process, a little retrospective for new people. And I would say maybe check that out first, see if this whole enterprise interests you. And then from there will be a bunch of links, different stuff to start. And we will have just started our next one. If you don't want to commit to a 100-hour enterprise, right? The Pod Universe with Dylan and Dalton will have just begun. If it's coming out in the first week of September, then we will have put out our slate reveal episode. And then on the September 7th and on September 14th, the first chapter of our first pitch will be out. And I can say this because we're doing the first movie is called Pod People.
Oh, okay.
It is, as you can expect, there's a little bit of a riff happening on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but in a couple sideways ways. We're not just doing Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But
fascinating.
We're starting with sort of a paranoid thriller, and that's going to set up sort of the stakes of what our universe is going to be doing. Beyond that, we're not saying much, but
completely understandable.
Yeah, and we're going to be, assuming I can keep the pipeline moving at a proper pace, that'll be on YouTube, and you'll be able to see, you'll be able to read the script as we read it. There will be sort of a video component to it. Yeah, check it out.
I am so excited for that. Our last segment that we always do here is, I have shamelessly stolen it from the Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast with NPR. They often do some stuff called What's Making You Happy This Week, where you just share something that you watched, read, you've been working on lately that has brought you a lot of joy. If you do not have yours at the top of your mind, I can go first.
Go ahead.
I have personally been playing Fallout 4 for the first time lately, based off of the suggestion of my soon-to-be brother-in-law, and that is a video game that I think I have sunk in way too many hours into already, but it is the world set up by that game, and like the kind of latent horror in that world of like radiation, stuff like that, is so well done. I went to the section of the world where all music cuts out except for your Geiger counter, and so it's so irradiated, like it's where the bomb fell in this part of the world, and it is
and is the counter like the speaker in your controller and everything?
Yes, it comes from.
Oh, that's awesome.
You can feel it in your controller, and it's like coming from the screen too. So
awesome.
It is like genuinely terrifying. I love any type of nuclear fallout horror. It is so interesting to me. So it's crazy I have not gotten to this game yet, but it is so well done.
I'm bringing up the address where I can recommend people to the book that I just read. That's right, I read a book. I'm breaking kayfabe. I do occasionally read. It helps when someone I like has written something and sent it to me. My friend Merritt Kay, who has been a voice on the show a couple of times, she just put out a novella called Vampirocene. which is it's about 100 pages. It's 104 pages. It's a pretty breezy read in the sense that it really moves, but it's got a lot going on under the hood. The premise basically is that a big pop star comes out as a vampire, and the main character is the producer of sort of like a Chapo style leftist like comedy news podcast, and a whole chain of events happens that's kind of like messing with this guy's livelihood, or everyone's worldview is getting shifted because suddenly they're like, oh yeah, I guess there's vampires. World's pretty weird, right? And so there's a little bit of that True Blood science fiction style social sci-fi interpretation of vampires and their sort of impact on the world there. But it's also like, to me, this is one of those things where this is what I took out of it. I don't know if that's what Merritt put into it, because she liked this post but didn't retweet it, which makes me think maybe this was not the same thing that she was thinking about when she wrote it. But I think it has a lot to do with the sort of the allure of doomerism versus the desperate need that we have to believe that somebody's going to save us. Because saving ourselves is scary and messy. The idea that, like, in this story, this is all early on, I'm not going to spoil anything. This pop star says, basically there's a race of very old creatures who have been here a long time, and we're better at long-term planning than you guys are because we live longer, right? Ooh. And so we're going to do what we can to kind of solve this whole climate thing, just to like fix the political problem. We're here to help, right? Our main character is very suspicious of that. And based on the spooky cover of the book, you can imagine suspicions are not entirely unfounded. It's the idea that, like, okay, what if aliens landed tomorrow and said, don't worry, we got this.
Fascinating.
There would be a temptation to be like, oh my god, thank god, because we are so fucked right now. There's no way we're solving this problem on our own. And then deciding that now you can be like, all right, hands off, you got this. Versus the impulse that we have, especially on the left, to be like, there's no way this is for real. There's no way there's got to be an ulterior motive here. And exploring the sort of push and pull of these things within a story that is creepy and sexy and moody and fun. You can find it at Merrittk, that's MERRITTK.itch.io. It's a $3 downloadable book. It's a really nice way to spend, for me, 2 evenings.
Sweet. I am going to have to read that. That sounds absolutely amazing. Before we leave here, since it is closing time at the tavern, is there anything you would like to shout out?
Between that, I mean, please check out the Pod Universe. Hopefully, if you search for Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, you'll still find us. We are going to be rebranding all our stuff because we're moving forward. But the Pod Universe with Dylan and Dalton, while I'm promoting books that my friends wrote, Maddie Lipchansky's new graphic novel, Simplicity, also very good. And we were talking about how great a songwriter Dalton Deshane is. Dalton's got a lot of albums out of their own. Dalton Deshane and the Traveling Show. Check that shit out because they're fantastic.
That's amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this lovely episode. Keep telling amazing stories. Thank you so much to Dylan Roth for coming on and speaking with us for this wonderful hour. Have a great rest of your evening. Stay safe, people out there. Bye-bye.